Every champion knows that life, like racing, can change in a single moment. For Jasmine Taylor, that moment came on an ordinary Tuesday at the Silver Spoon Diner in Austin, Texas. One simple act of kindness toward a customer in a hoodie and sunglasses. Formula One champion Lewis Hamilton cost her the job she'd held for 3 years. A job she desperately needed to support her racing-obsessed 8-year-old son. But fate has a funny way of working, especially during race week in Austin. Because that firing wasn't the end of Jasmine's story. It was just the first turn in a journey that would reveal shocking truths about her past, connect her to the racing world she never knew she belonged to, and prove that sometimes the biggest victories come from having the courage to help others, no matter the cost. They say kindness always comes back to you. For Jasmine Taylor, it was about to come back in ways she could never have imagined. Jasmine Taylor's feet ached as she pushed through the swinging doors of the Silver Spoon Diner's kitchen. The morning rush had finally slowed down, and she had exactly 45 minutes until she needed to pick up Marcus from school. Her 8-year-old son had been extra excited this morning, talking non-stop about the Formula One race coming to Austin this weekend. Not that they could afford tickets, but just knowing his heroes were in the same city made Marcus's eyes shine. "Order up for table 7. Rico, the cook, called out, sliding 2 plates of steaming chicken fried steak across the stainless steel counter. Jasmine grabbed them with practiced ease, balancing them on her forearm as she snagged a bottle of hot sauce with her free hand. "Thanks, Rico. Any word on whether they're giving you that Saturday off?" she asked, knowing he'd been trying to swap shifts to take his kids to the race. Rico shook his head, his dark curls bouncing under his white cook's cap. "No luck, but hey, at least we might see some race fans come through here. The track's only 15 minutes away." Jasmine nodded, already heading toward table 7. She'd learned long ago that cold food meant smaller tips, and tips were what kept Marcus in sneakers and school supplies. As she served the 2 truckers their lunch, her mind wandered to the bills piling up on her kitchen counter. The rent was due next week, and Marcus's school had just announced a field trip to the Science Museum. $20 might not seem like much to some people, but right now it might as well have been $200. The bell above the diner's door chimed, pulling her from her worries. A man in a black hoodie and sunglasses slipped in, choosing a booth in the far corner. Something about the way he moved caught Jasmine's attention. Despite trying to look casual, he had the smooth grace of an athlete. "I'll be right with you," she called out, quickly finishing up with the truckers. As she approached the new customer's table, she noticed his expensive watch peeking out from under his sleeve. It wasn't unusual to see wealthy customers during race weekend, but this felt different. The man glanced up, and Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. Even behind the sunglasses, she'd know that face anywhere. Marcus had posters of Lewis Hamilton plastered all over his bedroom walls. The 7-time Formula One champion was sitting in her section, trying to have a quiet lunch. Without missing a beat, Jasmine treated him just like any other customer. "Welcome to Silver Spoon. Can I start you off with something to drink?" She saw his shoulders relax slightly, grateful for her discretion. "Just water for now." "Thanks," he said softly, his British accent confirming what she already knew. As Jasmine filled his water glass, she thought about how excited Marcus would be if he knew. But she'd learned long ago that everyone deserves a peaceful meal, famous or not. She'd seen plenty of musicians and actors come through the diner during various festivals, and her policy was always the same: treat them like anybody else. The lunch rush picked up again, keeping Jasmine busy with a steady stream of customers. She moved efficiently between tables, refilling coffee cups and delivering plates, but always kept an eye on Hamilton's booth. When his food arrived, a classic burger with sweet potato fries, she made sure to bring extra napkins and ketchup without being asked. Time flew by, and soon Jasmine noticed it was almost time to leave for school pickup. She started her usual routine of settling bills with her customers when she saw Hamilton reaching for his back pocket. A slight frown crossed his face as he patted his jeans. "Everything okay, sir?" she asked quietly, approaching his table. "I seem to have left my wallet at the hotel," he said, looking genuinely embarrassed. "I'm so sorry about this. I can call someone to bring it, or—" Jasmine glanced at the clock. Marcus's school was strict about late pickups, and waiting for someone to bring a wallet from downtown would take too long. Without hesitation, she pulled out her own wallet. "Don't worry about it. Lunch is on me today," she said, already heading to the register. She could feel Hamilton starting to protest behind her, but she pretended not to hear. The bill came to $16.95. There went Marcus's field trip money. But something in her heart told her it was the right thing to do. As she ran his receipt, she noticed a group of teenagers at another table pointing at Hamilton's corner. One of them was pulling out his phone. Jasmine knew that look. Within minutes, the quiet lunch would turn into a social media circus. Making a quick decision, she walked back to Hamilton's table. "Sir, if you'd like to avoid the crowd, you're welcome to use our back exit through the kitchen. Rico won't mind." Hamilton looked where she was subtly gesturing and saw the teenagers too. "That's very kind of you, but I can't let you pay for my meal. Please, let me sort this out." "Consider it a thank you," Jasmine said softly. "My son Marcus, he wants to be a racing driver because of you. He works twice as hard at school now, because I told him that's what real champions do. They give their all in everything they do." Something shifted in Hamilton's expression. "Marcus sounds like a smart young man. What's your name?" "Jasmine. Jasmine Taylor." "Thank you, Jasmine Taylor, for everything." He stood up, and she guided him through the kitchen just as the first teenagers started walking toward his now empty booth. Rico's eyes widened as they passed through, but he just gave Jasmine a quick nod. It wasn't until Hamilton had safely slipped out the back door that Jasmine heard her manager's voice behind her. "Taylor, my office now!" Mr. Peterson stood in his doorway, his face an alarming shade of red. Jasmine's heart sank. She glanced at the clock again. 15 minutes until school pickup. Marcus would be waiting, watching all the other kids leave with their parents. As she followed Mr. Peterson into his office, she couldn't shake the feeling that her simple act of kindness was about to cost her more than just $16.95. But looking back at the empty booth where Lewis Hamilton had sat, she knew she'd do it all again. Some things were more important than money, and teaching Marcus about kindness was at the top of that list. The office door closed behind her with a click that sounded far too final for a Tuesday afternoon. Through the thin walls, she could hear the teenagers still buzzing about, almost meeting their racing hero, completely unaware that their excitement might have just cost a single mom her job. But Jasmine stood tall, her waitress's smile finally fading as she faced her manager. Whatever happened next, she'd face it with the same grace and dignity she'd shown while serving the racing champion. After all, that's what she always told Marcus. It's not about what happens to you. It's about how you handle it. The wall clock ticked loudly, counting down the minutes until school pickup, as Mr. Peterson opened his mouth to speak. "Have you completely lost your mind?" Mr. Peterson's voice crackled with anger. "You can't just let random people walk through my kitchen." Jasmine's hands twisted in her apron. "Sir, I was just trying to help a customer avoid a crowd. It was getting chaotic out there." "Chaotic?" Mr. Peterson leaned forward over his cluttered desk. You know what's chaotic? Having some stranger wander through my kitchen without proper clearance. Do you have any idea about liability? Health code violations? Through the thin office walls, Jasmine could hear the excitement still bubbling in the dining room. Someone squealed, "I can't believe Lewis Hamilton was here," followed by the distinct sound of phones clicking photos of his empty booth. Mr. Peterson, that stranger, was Lewis Hamilton. He's one of the most famous. I don't care if he was the Queen of England. His fist came down on the desk, making his coffee mug rattle. Rules are rules, Taylor. You've worked here long enough to know better. Jasmine glanced at the clock again. 10 minutes until school pickup. Marcus would be sitting on the front steps, soon watching for her old blue Honda. Her son hated being the last one waiting, especially since Tommy Chen had started making comments about it. I understand, sir. It won't happen again. She tried to keep her voice steady. May I please leave for school pickup? I can make up the time tomorrow. Mr. Peterson's face twisted into something that made Jasmine's stomach clench. Oh, you'll have plenty of time tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. Sir? You're fired, Taylor. Clear out your locker and turn in your apron. The words hit her like a physical blow. But I've worked here for 3 years. I've never been late, never called in sick. Please, I have a son to support. Should have thought about that before you started making up your own rules. He pulled out a form from his desk drawer. I'll mail your final check. At least let me finish my shift, Jasmine pleaded, thinking of the tips she'd earned today. Tips she needed for Marcus's field trip money. Tips she'd given up to buy a famous race car driver's lunch. Out. Now. Mr. Peterson pointed to the door. With trembling fingers, Jasmine untied her apron. She placed it carefully on his desk, smoothing out the wrinkles one last time. 3 years of early mornings, aching feet, and customer service smiles ended over one act of kindness. Rico was waiting by her locker when she walked out, his usually cheerful face drawn with concern. I heard, he said softly. That's not right. Jasmine, you were just helping someone. Thanks, Rico. She pulled out her purse and jacket, leaving the spare uniform shirt hanging lonely on its hook. Take care of yourself, okay? Wait. Rico reached into his pocket and pulled out some crumpled bills. Your tips from today. I collected them from your tables after, you know. Jasmine's eyes burned as she counted the money. $43 and change. With Hamilton's lunch taken out, it left her just enough for Marcus's field trip. Maybe this was karma's way of balancing things out. You're good people, Rico, she said, giving him a quick hug. Don't let this place change that. The kitchen. Staff watched silently as she walked through the back door one last time. The same door she'd led Hamilton through just 15 minutes ago. Funny how life could flip upside down so fast. In her car, Jasmine allowed herself exactly 30 seconds to cry. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 30 Mississippi. Then she wiped her eyes, checked her mascara in the rearview mirror, and started the engine. Marcus couldn't see her like this. He had enough to worry about without knowing his mom had just lost her job. She pulled up to the school just as the final bell rang. Kids poured out of the building like confetti, their excited chatter about the upcoming weekend filling the air. Marcus bounded down the steps, his backpack covered in racing stickers, and his smile bright enough to chase away some of her darkness. Mom! He practically jumped into the car. Tommy said his dad got last-minute tickets to the race. They're going to see Lewis Hamilton drive. That's wonderful, honey. Jasmine forced her voice to stay cheerful. How was your math test? I got an A. Marcus dug through his backpack, pulling out a paper covered in red check marks. I remembered what you said about champions giving their all, so I studied extra hard. Pride squeezed Jasmine's heart. That's my boy. Hey, what do you say we celebrate? I've got enough here for your field trip money, and maybe we could split a sundae at Dairy Queen? Marcus's eyes lit up, then dimmed slightly. But Mom, you always say we have to save extra money for important things. Sometimes celebrating my champion's hard work is the most important thing, Jasmine said, ruffling his hair. She didn't mention that this might be their last treat for a while. As they drove to Dairy Queen, Marcus chattered about his day and his dreams of becoming a racing driver. Jasmine listened, adding enthusiastic comments in all the right places, while her mind raced through job possibilities. The mall was always hiring, but the pay was worse than the diner. Maybe the new hotel by the track needed housekeepers? Mom? Marcus's voice broke through her thoughts. Do you think Dad would be proud of my A? Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. Marcus rarely asked about his father. Of course he would, baby. He'd be proud of everything about you. Even though I'm not as brave as the other kids? What do you mean? Marcus picked at a loose thread on his backpack. Tommy said I was scared to ride the go-karts at his birthday party. But they went so fast, Mom. I didn't want to crash like Dad did. Jasmine pulled into the Dairy Queen parking lot and turned to face her son. Listen to me, Marcus Taylor. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what's right even when you are scared. And sometimes being brave means knowing when to wait until you're ready. Like Lewis Hamilton? He must get scared going that fast. I bet he does, Jasmine said, thinking of the champion's gentle thank you. In Friday, the diner. But he prepares himself, trains hard, and doesn't let fear stop him. Just like you didn't let being scared of that math test stop you from getting an A. Marcus's smile returned, brighter than before. Maybe next time I'll try the go-karts. But only if you're there, Mom. Always, baby. Jasmine squeezed his hand. I'll always be there. As they walked into Dairy Queen, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a text from Rico. You'll never believe what just happened at the diner. Call me when you can. But Marcus was already pressing his nose against the ice cream display, and Jasmine tucked the phone away. Whatever drama was unfolding at her former workplace could wait. Right now, she needed to focus on her son's smile and figure out how to keep it there, even with their world suddenly shifting beneath their feet. She just hoped that somewhere in this city, full of racing dreams and uncertain futures, there was a job waiting for a waitress who chose kindness over rules. The next morning hit like a bucket of cold water. For the first time in 3 years, Jasmine didn't have to be at the diner by 6 a.m. No more checking the coffee urns, no more restocking sugar packets, no more early morning regulars asking for their usual. She sat at her small kitchen table, staring at her phone. Rico's text from last night still waited for a response, but she couldn't bring herself to hear about the diner yet. Not when she had to figure out how to make rent this month. Mom? Marcus appeared in his race car pajamas, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Why aren't you at work? Jasmine forced a smile. I thought we could have breakfast together today. How about pancakes? Marcus's face lit up, then fell slightly. But it's Wednesday. You never make pancakes on Wednesday. Well, some things are changing. Jasmine got up and started pulling ingredients from the cupboard. Remember how we talked about being brave yesterday? Sometimes life throws us curves, just like in racing, and we have to adjust. Did something bad happen? Marcus climbed onto a kitchen chair, his dark eyes serious. Jasmine cracked eggs into a bowl, buying time to find the right words. "I'm not going to work at the diner anymore. But don't worry, I'm going to find an even better job." "Was it because you helped that customer? Rico texted you about it." She nearly dropped the whisk. "How did you know about that?" Marcus pulled out his tablet, the one his school provided. "It's all over TikTok. Look." There on the screen was shaky footage of Lewis Hamilton leaving the diner through the back door, followed by Mr. Peterson's angry voice. The video had thousands of views. "Oh no," Jasmine whispered. "But Mom, you're like a hero." The comments all say Mr. Peterson was mean. Tommy's sister shared it and said, "Marcus, honey, put the tablet away. It's breakfast time." As she poured batter onto the griddle, memories of yesterday flooded back. The way Hamilton had smiled when she mentioned Marcus, the teenager's excited whispers, Mr. Peterson's red face. All those years of perfect service ended because she'd helped someone avoid a crowd. The pancakes were halfway done when someone knocked on their apartment door. Jasmine froze, spatula in hand. Rent wasn't due for another week, but their landlord, Mrs. Chen, sometimes checked in early when she suspected tenants might have trouble paying. "I'll get it!" Marcus jumped up. "Wait!" But he was already opening the door. Instead of Mrs. Chen, Rico stood in the hallway, still in his cook's uniform. "Jasmine, you need to see this." He held out his phone, showing a local news website. The headline made her stomach drop. "F1 champion defends fired waitress." "There's more," Rico said, scrolling down. "The diner's getting destroyed on social media. People are calling for boycotts. Mr. Peterson's trying to do damage control, but..." "Stop!" Jasmine took the pancakes off the heat. "Marcus, honey, go. Get dressed for school." "But Mom..." "Now, please." Once Marcus was in his room, Jasmine turned to Rico. "I don't want this kind of attention. I just need a job. That's why I'm here. My cousin manages that new steakhouse downtown. They're looking for experienced servers, and she's willing to interview you today." Hope flickered in Jasmine's chest. "Really? Rico, that would be..." Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. "Ms. Taylor?" A crisp British voice asked. "This is Angela Martinez from Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team. Mr. Hamilton would like to speak with you regarding yesterday's incident." Jasmine nearly dropped the phone. In his room, she could hear Marcus humming the Formula One theme song while getting ready. I'm sorry, but I need to get my son to school." "Of course. Could we arrange a meeting for later today?" "Mr. Hamilton feels terrible about what happened." Rico was watching her with wide eyes. She covered the phone. "It's Hamilton's team," she whispered. "Take the meeting," Rico urged, but Jasmine remembered the viral video, the news article, all the unwanted attention. "I'm sorry," she said into the phone. "Please tell Mr. Hamilton I appreciate his concern, but I don't want to make this situation any bigger than it is. I just want to move forward." She hung up before Ms. Martinez could respond. Rico stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "Jasmine, this could be huge. Hamilton could help you." "Help me what? Become some viral story about the poor waitress who got fired? Marcus doesn't need that kind of attention. He's already dealing with enough at school." As if on cue, Marcus emerged from his room wearing his favorite Lewis Hamilton t-shirt, the one she'd saved up 3 weeks of tips to buy for his birthday. "Mom, the pancakes are burning." The smell of scorched batter filled the kitchen. Jasmine rushed to the stove, scraping the blackened circles into the trash. "I've got to get him to school," she told Rico. "But thank you, really thank you, for the job lead. Text me your cousin's number?" Rico nodded. but his expression said he thought she was making a mistake. Maybe she was. But as she watched Marcus carefully pack his tablet into his backpack, all she could think about was protecting him. They drove to school in silence. Radio turned low to some morning show discussing the upcoming race. Marcus kept sneaking glances at her, his small face worried in a way no 8-year-olds should be. "Mom?" he finally asked as they pulled up to the school. "Are we going to be okay?" Jasmine turned off the engine and faced her son. "Do you remember what happened in Malaysia last year, when Hamilton's car had trouble at the start?" Marcus nodded eagerly. "He dropped to last place, but then he fought his way back up, position by position. Because that's what champions do when things get tough. They don't give up. And he finished third." Marcus grinned. "It was amazing." "That's right. So, trust me, we might be starting from the back of the grid right now. But we're going to work our way up, together." Marcus's smile wavered. "I heard Tommy saying his mom might not let him come to my birthday party next month, because we live in the poor apartments." The words hit Jasmine like a physical blow. She'd been saving for months to rent out the indoor karting track for Marcus's party. Most of that money would have to go to rent now. "Baby, Another knock on the car window made them both jump. Mrs. Chen stood there, holding what looked like a letter. "Jasmine, good thing I catch you. This come yesterday. Very important looking." Through the window, Jasmine could see the gold letterhead of Anderson and Lopez law firm. Her heart sank further. Were they being evicted already? "Thanks, Mrs. Chen," she managed, taking the envelope. "Marcus, you better get to class." She watched her son walk into school, his backpack covered in racing stickers bouncing with each step. Once he was inside, she finally looked at the letter in her hands. The envelope was thick, expensive-feeling paper, the kind that usually meant trouble for people like her. With trembling fingers, she started to tear it open, wondering what else this day could possibly throw at her. Before Jasmine could open the letter, her phone buzzed with a text from Rico's cousin about the steakhouse interview. 2 o'clock. Her eyes darted to the car's dashboard clock. 8:15 a.m. Nearly 6 hours to get home, change into her best outfit, and prepare for the interview. She could do this. The letter would have to wait. Driving back to their apartment complex, Jasmine noticed more people than usual hanging around the diner. Several held signs. "Kindness shouldn't cost jobs," and "Boycott Peterson's prejudice." Her stomach twisted. She took the long way home to avoid passing directly by her former workplace. Mrs. Chen was sweeping the walkway when Jasmine pulled in. The elderly landlady leaned on her broom, watching as Jasmine gathered her purse and the mysterious letter. "You good girl, Jasmine," Mrs. Chen called out. "My Tommy tell me what happened at diner. That boss man, he have small heart." Jasmine winced at the mention of Tommy. The same Tommy who made fun of Marcus for living in the poor apartments was Mrs. Chen's grandson. Life had a weird way of connecting people. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. But please, don't worry about me. I have a job interview today." "Ah, good luck, charm." Mrs. Chen disappeared into her ground-floor apartment and emerged with something red and shiny. "Chinese lucky dragon. You keep today." The small dragon figurine was worn smooth from handling, its golden eyes barely visible anymore. Jasmine tried to refuse, but Mrs. Chen pressed it into her hand. "My father give this to me when I come America. Say always remember. Dragon, no care what others think. Dragon no own worth." Tears pricked at Jasmine's eyes. "I'll bring it back, tonight." "Keep until new job," Mrs. Chen insisted. "Now go! Get ready!" Inside her apartment, Jasmine finally sat down at the kitchen table, the letter and dragon figurine in front of her. The morning sun caught the dragon's faded scales, making them shimmer. Taking a deep breath, she opened the envelope. Bills spilled out, but not the kind she was used to. These were crisp $100 bills, wrapped in a paper band marked $5,000. Behind them was a handwritten note on expensive stationery. "Dear Ms. Taylor, your kindness yesterday meant more than you know. Please accept this as repayment for my meal and compensation for any trouble caused. I've also taken the liberty of having my legal team look into your situation, LH." Jasmine's hands shook. $5,000. It would cover rent, Marcus's birthday party, new shoes for school, and still leave enough for a safety net while she job hunted. But she carefully put the money back in the envelope. Dragons know their own worth, she thought, looking at Mrs. Chen's figurine. Taking Hamilton's money felt too much like charity, like admitting she couldn't take care of Marcus on her own. Her phone buzzed again, another unknown number. "Ms. Taylor?" A different voice this time, warm and maternal. "This is Patricia Anderson from Anderson & Lopez. We're handling some matters for Mr. Hamilton, and we've discovered some information that might interest you. Could you come to our office today?" Jasmine glanced at the clock. Still plenty of time before the steakhouse interview. "What kind of information?" "I'm afraid I can't discuss it over the phone, but I assure you it's important. It concerns your family history." Family history? Jasmine's grip tightened on the phone. She'd aged out of the foster system at 18, with no information about her birth parents, except that her father had died in an accident, and her mother had surrendered her rights shortly after. "I have a job interview at 2, she said carefully. "We can meet at 11? Our office is downtown, near the circuit." Near where Marcus's father had died, she thought. He'd been driving home from a late shift at the track's construction site when his car went off the road. The police said he fell asleep at the wheel. "Ms. Taylor, are you still there?" The dragon figurine caught the light again, its golden eyes seeming to wink at her. "Dragons know their own worth." "Yes," Jasmine heard herself say. 11 o'clock works." After hanging up, she stared at the money in the envelope. Her fingers traced the edges of the bills, remembering other envelopes. The one from the hospital the night Marcus's father died. The one from the foster care system when she turned 18. The one from her high school saying she'd have to drop out to work. Each envelope had changed her life. Each time, she'd fought back, found a way forward. But she'd done it alone. The sound of children playing outside drifted through the window. Soon, the complex would be quiet, as parents left for work and kids went to school. Normal lives with normal jobs and normal problems. Jasmine stood up, squaring her shoulders. She had exactly 2 hours to shower, do her hair, and find an outfit professional enough for both a law office and a restaurant interview. The money went into her sock drawer. She'd figure out what to do with it later. But Mrs. Chen's dragon she tucked into her purse. In her bedroom mirror, she practiced her interview smile. "Hi, I'm Jasmine Taylor. I have 10 years of restaurant experience." The words felt hollow now. How could she explain a sudden firing without mentioning Hamilton? How could she ask for references when her last boss was being boycotted on social media? Her eyes fell on the photo by her bed. Marcus at his 7th birthday, cake frosting on his nose, wearing his first racing team cap. He'd been so proud that day, telling everyone he was going to be a champion just like Hamilton. Now, Hamilton's Ur. Money sat in her drawer while lawyers wanted to discuss her family history. It felt like the universe was playing some elaborate joke. Her phone buzzed one more time. "Rico, they're saying Hamilton's coming back to the diner today," his text read. "Peterson's freaking out. You should see this." Jasmine turned off her phone. Whatever was happening at the diner wasn't her problem anymore. She had a son to think about, interviews to prepare for, and apparently some family history to uncover. As she sorted through her closet for her best outfit, a memory surfaced. Her first foster mom teaching her to iron clothes for job interviews. "Remember," she'd said, "first impressions matter, but it's what's inside that keeps the job." What was inside Jasmine right now was a storm of emotions. Fear about the future, curiosity about the lawyers, pride that wouldn't let her take Hamilton's money, and underneath it all, a tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, something good could come from all this chaos. She pulled out her one good blazer, the one she'd bought secondhand for Marcus's school conferences. The sleeve had a small tear near the elbow. As she dug out her sewing kit to fix it, she remembered what she'd told Marcus yesterday about champions adjusting to curves in the road. The dragon figurine watched from her purse as she threaded the needle. Its golden eyes seemed to hold secrets, just like the law office waiting downtown. In a few hours, she'd either have answers about her past or just more questions to keep her up at night. The envelope in her sock drawer seemed to weigh on her. Thoughts: $5,000, a legal team, family history. It was too much, too fast, too strange. But then again, strange things happened in Austin during race week. Champions showed up in diners. Waitresses lost jobs and found dragons. And maybe, just maybe, long-buried secrets came back to life. The Anderson and Lopez Law Office occupied the top floor of a gleaming downtown building. Jasmine's reflection in the elevator's polished doors showed a woman trying her best to look confident. Borrowed blazer carefully mended, hair pulled back neatly. Mrs. Chen's dragon tucked safely in her purse. At exactly 10:55 a.m., she stepped into a reception area that probably cost more than her yearly rent. A young man in a crisp suit looked up from his desk. "Ms. Taylor? Mrs. Anderson is expecting you." He led her down a hallway lined with framed photographs. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. They were all racing pictures. Vintage Formula One cars, legendary drivers, historic moments frozen in time. The last photo made her pause. It showed a young driver in 1990s racing gear, holding a trophy and grinning at the camera. Something about his smile seemed familiar. "That's Michael Rivers," the receptionist said, noticing her interest. "He was one of the most promising American drivers of his generation." Such a tragedy. Before Jasmine could ask what tragedy, a door opened and a tall woman with silver hair emerged. "Jasmine, I'm Patricia Anderson. Please come in." The office was smaller than Jasmine expected, and warmer too. Books lined the walls, and more racing memorabilia sat on the shelves. Mrs. Anderson gestured to a comfortable chair. "Thank you for coming. I know this must seem strange." "If this is about Mr. Hamilton's money," Jasmine started, "I appreciate the gesture, but this isn't about Lewis's gift, though I understand your hesitation to accept it." Mrs. Anderson sat behind her desk. "This is about your father." The dragon figurine pressed against Jasmine's side through her purse. "My father died in a construction accident. I never knew him." Mrs. Anderson's expression softened. "Who told you it was a construction accident?" "The social workers. They said." Jasmine's voice trailed off as Mrs. Anderson opened a file on her desk. "Your father was Michael Rivers," she said gently, turning the file so Jasmine could see. The same man you were just looking at in that hallway photo. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Jasmine stared at the documents in front of her. Newspaper, clippings, racing statistics, and a birth certificate with her name on it. Father: Michael James Rivers. That's not possible, she whispered. My father was a construction worker. Your father was a racing driver who died during practice for the 1994 Phoenix Grand Prix. Your mother. Mrs. Anderson paused. Your mother was young, overwhelmed. Michael's death made international news, and she wanted to protect you from the media attention. Jasmine's hand found the dragon in her purse, its solid weight anchoring her to reality. Why are you telling me this now? Because Lewis Hamilton recognized your smile. Mrs. Anderson pulled out another photo. Michael Rivers grinning on the Waitress podium. He was only 9 when your father died, but Michael was his hero. The first time he saw you in that diner, something clicked. When the incident happened, he asked us to look into it. The room felt too small suddenly. Jasmine stood up, walking to the window. Down below, she could see the city preparing for race. Weekend. Banners being hung, streets being closed off. Did my mother... She couldn't finish the question. She passed away 5 years ago, Mrs. Anderson said softly. But she left letters for you. And there's more. Your father's estate was never fully settled. There's a trust fund. Jasmine turned sharply. I don't want money. What about Marcus? The question hit hard. How do you know about my son? Lewis mentioned him. Said he wants to be a racing driver. Mrs. Anderson smiled. It's in his blood, apparently. Jasmine sank back into her chair, memories flooding in. Marcus's natural instinct for speed on his bicycle, his ability to memorize race statistics, the way he could predict when drivers would pit stop, almost, like he could feel the rhythm of the race. There's no pressure to decide anything today, Mrs. Anderson continued. But there are people who'd like to meet you. Your father's old team manager is in town for the race. And Lewis, stop! Jasmine held up her hand. Please, it's too much. Mrs. Anderson nodded, closing the file. Of course, take some time. But Jasmine, she pulled out a business card. Your father was more than just a racing driver. He was known for his kindness, for helping younger drivers. Sound familiar? The dragon in Jasmine's purse seemed heavier now, like it was filled with all these new truths. She thought of Marcus, probably sitting in math class right now, drawing race cars in the margins of his notebook. I have a job interview at 2, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. At Ricardo's steakhouse? Ah. Mrs. Anderson's eyes twinkled. Owned by the Ricardo family. They used to sponsor your father's early races. Of course they did. Jasmine stood up, legs shaking slightly. Thank you for telling me. But I need time. Naturally. But perhaps you should read this first. Mrs. Anderson handed her an envelope. Different from Hamilton's, older. Your mother wrote it the day she took you to social services. Whatever you decide, you deserve to know why. The elevator ride down was a blur. In the lobby, Jasmine caught her reflection again. Same borrowed. Blazer, same neat hair, but everything else had changed. The woman staring back at her wasn't just a waitress who'd lost her job. She was Michael Rivers's daughter. A racing legacy. Outside, engine sounds echoed from the direction of the track. Practice sessions would be starting soon. Somewhere in that mix of sound and speed, her father's ghost lingered. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Rico and a text. Boss lady loved your resume. Interview moved to 3. Also, you need to see the news. Jasmine looked at her watch. 2 hours until the interview. 2 hours to decide who she really was. The cautious single mom who played it safe. Or the daughter of a man who made his living pushing limits. In her purse, Mrs. Chen's dragon rested against her mother's unopened letter. 2 pieces of history, one borrowed and one inherited, both promising to show her the way forward. A familiar sound made her look up. A sleek black car had stopped at the light, its engine purring. Behind the tinted windows, she caught a glimpse of a driver in a Mercedes team jacket. The light turned green. As the car pulled away, Jasmine made her decision. She found a bench in the nearby park and took out her mother's letter. "Dragons know their own worth," Mrs. Chen had said. Maybe it was time to discover hers. With trembling fingers, Jasmine opened the yellowed envelope. The paper inside was thin, like it had been folded and unfolded many times before being sealed away. Her mother's handwriting was delicate, almost hesitant. "My dearest Jasmine, by the time you read this, you'll know the truth about your father. Michael was more than just a racing driver. He was the bravest, kindest soul I've ever known. We met when I was working in the paddock, just 17 and starstruck by everything Formula One. He was different from the other drivers. He noticed people others overlooked. The day he died, he'd been testing new safety features. 'If it helps keep one driver safe,' he said that morning, 'it's worth the risk.' That was your father, always thinking of others first. I was 20 and terrified when he died. The media wanted interviews, the racing teams wanted statements, and all I wanted was to protect you from the circus that Formula One can become. Maybe I was wrong to hide your heritage, but I thought I was giving you a chance at a normal life. I followed your story from afar. Every birthday, every Christmas, I wanted to tell you. But as the years passed, it got harder to find the right words. The trust fund your father left, it wasn't just money. It was his dream for you. Our kid's going to change the world, he used to say, just like their old man, but smarter. He knew you'd inherit his heart, his need to help others. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to keep you. I'm sorry I let fear win. But I'm not sorry for giving you a chance to become your own person, away from the shadow of your father's legacy. Whatever you decide to do with this truth, know that you were loved, so loved." A tear splashed onto the letter, smudging the ink. Jasmine quickly folded it back up, just as her phone buzzed with another text from Rico. "You need to see this now. Turn on the news." She found a local news station on her phone. The headline made her gasp. F1 champion Hamilton makes surprise announcement at local diner. The video showed Hamilton standing outside the Silver Spoon, surrounded by reporters. Mr. Peterson hovered anxiously in the background. "I came here yesterday because I wanted a quiet meal," Hamilton was saying. "What I found instead was kindness from someone who had no idea who I was. The kind of kindness that reminds you why you fell in love with racing in the first place." He paused, and Jasmine's heart stopped as she recognized the look in his eyes. The same one she'd seen in the photo of her father. "Michael Rivers was my hero growing up," Hamilton continued. "He taught me that being a champion isn't just about winning races. It's about lifting others up. Yesterday, his daughter showed me that his spirit lives on." The phone nearly slipped from Jasmine's grip. He'd just told the world. Reporters were already shouting questions. "Did you know who she was when you came to the diner? Is it true she was raised in foster care? What about the rumors of a trust fund?" Hamilton raised his hands for quiet. "Ms. Taylor's story is hers to tell. I'm here because a good person lost her job for showing kindness, and that's not right. So I've made a decision. The camera panned to show a "For Sale" sign being placed in the diner's window. "I'm buying this diner," Hamilton announced, "and I'm offering the management position to Jasmine Taylor. It's time to bring some of Michael's spirit back to Austin." Jasmine's head spun. Buy the diner? Make her manager? It was too much, too fast. She looked down at her mother's letter, then at Mrs. Chen's dragon peeking out of her purse. Her phone buzzed again. Rico. "Boss lady says come now for interview." Whole kitchen talking about news. She had to make a choice. The steakhouse interview offered a safe path. Normal job, normal life, no media attention. Hamilton's offer meant stepping into the spotlight, embracing a legacy she'd only just discovered. What would her father do? The answer came with the roar of engines from the track. Practice sessions were starting. Without thinking, Jasmine found herself walking toward the sound. The security guard at the paddock entrance did a double-take when she approached. "I'm Jasmine Taylor," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "I believe Lewis Hamilton is expecting me." The guard's eyes widened in recognition. "Yes, ma'am. Right this way." The paddock was a maze of team garages and hospitality. Units. Mechanics rushed past with tires, engineers huddled over laptops, and somewhere in the mix, cars screamed around the track. It should have felt alien, overwhelming. Instead, it felt like coming home. Outside the Mercedes garage, a familiar face waited. Angela Martinez, the woman who'd called yesterday, smiled warmly. "He hoped you'd come," she said, leading Jasmine inside. "Lewis has always said there are no coincidences in racing." The garage was organized chaos. In the center sat Hamilton's car, surrounded by mechanics making final adjustments. And there, studying data on a screen, was the man himself. Hamilton looked up as they approached. This time, there were no sunglasses, no hiding. "I hope I didn't overstep," he said quietly. With the announcement, Jasmine touched the dragon in her purse. "Why the diner?" "Because it's where Michael would have started." Hamilton's eyes crinkled. "He always said the best way to help people was to give them a place to belong." "That diner? It could be more than just a restaurant. It could be a home for people who need one, just like it had been for her. All those years serving customers, building a life for Marcus." "I have conditions," Jasmine heard herself say. Hamilton grinned, the same grin she'd seen in her father's victory photos. "Name them." "Rico becomes head chef. We start a program for foster kids, teaching them restaurant skills. And..." She took a deep breath. "My son gets proper racing lessons, if he wants them." Done, and Hamilton's grin widened. "Why don't you ask him yourself?" He nodded toward the garage entrance. There, eyes wide with wonder, stood Marcus. Behind him, Rico gave a thumbs up. "Mom?" Marcus's voice shook with excitement. "Is it true? About Grandpa?" Jasmine opened her arms, and her son ran into them. Over his head, she saw Hamilton watching with soft eyes. Through the garage door, she could see the track where her father had chased his dreams. Maybe Mrs. Chen was right. Dragons did know their own worth, and sometimes they just needed a reminder of where they came from to know where they were going. The next few hours passed in a blur of introductions and revelations. Hamilton's team welcomed Marcus like he was one of their own, showing him the car's steering wheel, explaining the buttons and paddles, while his eyes grew wider with each new detail. "Just like your racing games, right?" Jasmine watched her son, Nod enthusiastically as an engineer explained the DRS system. Better! Marcus couldn't stop grinning. Mom, did you see their simulator? They said I could try it. An older mechanic who'd been watching from the corner stepped forward. He's got Michael's instincts, he said quietly. I'd know that look anywhere. Jasmine turned to find herself face to face with a man in his 60s. His Mercedes team shirt worn and comfortable like a second skin. The name tag read Joe Martinez. You knew my father? She asked. Joe's weathered face softened. Knew him. I was his first mechanic back in the junior formulas. Taught him everything he knew about engines. He paused, studying her face. Been watching you since you walked in. You stand like him. Weight on your left foot when you're thinking hard. A lump formed in Jasmine's throat. All these years, she'd wondered where her habits came from. Which parent gave her the tendency to hum while cooking, to tap her fingers when nervous, to stand, apparently, with her weight on her left foot. Got something to show you, Joe said. If you've got a minute. Hamilton, who'd been watching Marcus in the simulator, caught her eye and nodded. Go on. He's got stories you should hear. Joe led her through the paddock to a small office tucked behind. The Mercedes hospitality unit. The walls were covered in racing memorabilia, old photos, worn pit passes, tattered race programs. He pulled a magazine from a filing cabinet. Autosport, June 1993, he said, handling the pages carefully. Your dad's first big interview. The article spread showed Michael Rivers leaning against his race car, young and confident. The headline read, America's Rising Star, the Heart Behind the Helmet. Read this part. Joe pointed to a paragraph halfway down. Jasmine's fingers traced. The words, when asked about his greatest dream, Rivers doesn't mention championships or podiums. I want to build something lasting, he says. A place where people can come together, feel welcome. Racing gave me a family when I needed one. I want to do that for others. Sound familiar? Joe smiled. When Lewis called about the diner, it was like hearing Michael all over again. He turned to another page and a photo slipped out. It showed her father in racing overalls, holding a baby. The back was dated, Michael and Jasmine, Phoenix Paddock, 1994. 2 weeks before the accident, Joe said softly, he was so proud of you. Showed that photo to everyone. I don't remember him, Jasmine whispered, but you're just like him. Lewis saw it right away at the diner. Said you had the same way of noticing people who needed help. Same way of making... It seemed natural. A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window they could see Marcus climbing out of the simulator, Hamilton giving him a high five. Your boy's a natural, Joe said. Beat Lewis's practice lap time on his third try. Pride and fear mixed in Jasmine's chest. Racing is dangerous. So is letting fear stop you from living. Joe pulled another magazine from the cabinet. Michael wrote something the week before Phoenix, for you. We found it in his locker after, well, been holding on to it, hoping someday. He handed her a sealed envelope. The paper yellowed with age. Her name was written on the front in strong, confident strokes. I'll give you a minute, Joe said, heading for the door. He paused. Oh, and Jasmine? Welcome home. Alone in the small office, surrounded by pieces of her father's life, Jasmine opened the letter. My little champion, if you're reading this, something's happened to me. I'm writing it because racing teaches you that every day is precious, and there are things you should hear from your dad, even if I'm not there to say them in person. First, know that you were my greatest victory. Not the races, not the trophies. You. The moment I first held you, I understood what really matters. Everything I do now, I do to make your world better. Second, don't let anyone tell you what you can't do. People said a kid from a small Texas town couldn't make it in Formula One. They were wrong. They'll be wrong about you too. Third, and this is important, life is a lot like racing. Sometimes you need to be cautious, plan your moves, but sometimes you need to take a chance, find a gap that others don't see. The trick is knowing the difference. I'm testing new safety features tomorrow. Your mom thinks I'm crazy to volunteer, but if it helps protect future drivers, it's worth the risk. That's another racing lesson. Sometimes the biggest victories come from helping others win. Whatever you do in life, remember this: you're a Rivers. We don't just chase dreams. We chase them for a reason. Find something that matters to you, something bigger than yourself, and give it everything you've got. I love you more than all the checkered flags in the world, Dad. Through her tears, Jasmine heard Marcus's excited voice getting closer. The door opened, and her son burst in, Hamilton and Joe behind him. "Mom, I beat the lap record, and Mr. Hamilton says I can come back tomorrow and—" Marcus stopped, seeing her tears. "Are you okay?" Jasmine pulled him close, breathing in the familiar smell of his shampoo, mixed with new traces of motor oil and rubber. "I'm perfect, baby. Just reading something from your grandfather." Hamilton pointed to the magazine Joe had shown her. "That interview changed my life, you know. I was 9, just starting in karts. Michael talked about racing being more than just winning. Said it was about lifting people up, giving them a chance to shine." "Like you did at the diner?" Marcus asked. "Like your mom did," Hamilton corrected. "I just followed her lead." Joe cleared his throat. "Team meeting's starting. Lewis needs to prep for qualifying." "Right." Hamilton checked his watch. "Jasmine, Angela will help you with the diner paperwork whenever you're ready. And, Marcus," he grinned, "see you in the simulator tomorrow?" After they left, Marcus picked up the photo of baby Jasmine with her father. "He looks happy," he said, simply. "Yeah." Jasmine touched her father's smiling face. "He does." "Mom?" Marcus bit his lip. "Is it okay that I want to race? Even though, you know?" Jasmine thought of her father's words. "Sometimes you need to be cautious, plan your moves, but sometimes you need to take a chance." "It's more than okay," she said. "It's in your blood. But we'll do it right. Start with karts, learn the basics. Deal?" Marcus hugged her so hard, she nearly dropped the photo. "Deal. Can we tell Mrs. Chen and Rico? And we'll tell everyone." Jasmine laughed. "But first, I need to make a phone call about a diner." Through the window, she could see the track where her father had chased his dreams, where her son might someday chase his, and where she'd finally found the missing pieces of herself. The dragon figurine sat on Joe's desk where she'd placed it earlier. Its golden eyes caught the light, reminding her that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a simple act of kindness. And sometimes they bring you exactly where you need to be. 1 year later, the morning sun streamed through the Silver Spoon Diner's newly installed windows, catching the gleam of the vintage racing photos lining the walls. The biggest one, hanging above the counter, showed Michael Rivers standing proudly in front of this very building, back when it had been called Pete's Place and had sponsored his first race car. Jasmine adjusted her name tag, the title Owner, Manager, still feeling new and wonderful. The breakfast rush would start soon, but first, she had a special task to complete. "Ready?" she called toward the kitchen. Rico emerged, carrying a cake decorated with racing flags. Behind him, a line of teenagers in the diner's work training program followed with plates and party supplies. The sign on the door still said, "Closed," but cars were already filling the parking lot. "Ready, boss?" Rico grinned. "Though I still say we should have made it car-shaped." "Next year," Jasmine promised. "Places, everyone. They'll be here any minute." The bell above the door chimed, and Mrs. Chen entered first, carrying her lucky dragon, now a permanent resident of the diner's good luck shrine. Behind her came a steady stream of guests. Joe Martinez, still in his Mercedes team shirt, Angela from Hamilton's office, several of Marcus's teachers, and finally, Lewis Hamilton himself, trying to look inconspicuous in his usual hoodie and sunglasses. "Is he here yet?" Hamilton asked, taking his regular booth, the same one he'd sat in that fateful day a year ago. "Tommy's bringing him," Jasmine said. "Should be." The sound of go-kart engines filled the parking lot. Through the windows they could see Tommy Chen pulling up in his father's truck, a racing cart strapped in the back. Next to it sat Marcus's own cart, gleaming with its new racing number, 27, the same number Michael Rivers had used. "Everyone ready?" Jasmine whispered. The door burst open, and Marcus ran in, still in his racing suit from morning practice. He stopped short, mouth open at the sight of the packed diner. "Surprise!" the crowd erupted. "Happy birthday!" 9 years old today, Marcus looked so much like the photos of his grandfather that it made Jasmine's heart ache. He had the same confident stance, the same bright smile, the same way of making everyone around him feel special. "Mom!" He ran to hug her. "You said we were just getting breakfast." "Champions deserve proper celebrations," Hamilton said, standing up, "especially ones who just won their first junior karting race." Marcus's victory the previous weekend had been the talk of the local racing scene, not just because he was Michael, Rivers' grandson, but because he'd given up a certain win to help another driver who'd spun out in the rain. Just like his mom, Joe had said, watching Marcus help the other kid back into the race. Just like Michael. Now, as Marcus blew out his candles and the diner filled with cheers, Jasmine looked around at the family they'd built. Rico was teaching the training program kids how to cut cake properly. Mrs. Chen was showing Hamilton her dragon's new golden stand. Tommy, once Marcus's bully, now his best friend and racing teammate, was helping distribute plates. Ms. Taylor, one of the training program teens, Sarah, a foster kid with a talent for baking, approached hesitantly. The new couple is here again. Through the window, Jasmine could see them. The same pair who'd been coming every morning for a week, sitting in their car, never quite brave enough to come in. The woman was pregnant, looking as scared as Jasmine's mother must have looked all those years ago. "Tell Rico to make up 2 breakfast specials," Jasmine said. "I'll be right back." Though morning air was crisp as she approached their car, the couple started to back out, but Jasmine held up her hands. "First meal's on the house," she said gently. "And we could use some help in the kitchen if you're looking for work." The man's shoulders relaxed slightly. We can't." "Everyone needs a place to belong," Jasmine said. "My father taught me that. Sometimes it's a racetrack, sometimes it's a diner. But everyone deserves a chance." Inside, she could hear Marcus telling Hamilton about his latest racing techniques. Could see Rico showing Sarah how to pipe frosting roses. Could feel her father's spirit in every corner of this place that had become so much more than just a restaurant. The couple exchanged looks. Maybe just breakfast," the woman said softly. "Perfect." Jasmine smiled. "I know just the table." She led them to the booth, Hamilton's booth, her father's booth now, where a small plaque read, "Every champion starts somewhere." Welcome home. The party swirled around them as the couple settled in. Marcus was opening presents: new racing gloves from Hamilton, a vintage steering wheel from Joe, a hand-knitted racing scarf from Mrs. Chen. But the biggest gift sat in the office, waiting for the right moment. Time for the last present, Jasmine announced. She brought out the thick photo album she'd spent months creating. Inside were pictures of Michael Rivers' entire career, collected from Joe's archives, racing magazines, and fans who'd heard their story. But more importantly, there were empty pages at the back, waiting to be filled. "This is your legacy, baby," she told Marcus as he opened it reverently. "But it's also your future. Those blank pages, they're for your story." "Our story," Marcus corrected, hugging her tight. Hamilton raised his coffee cup. "To Michael Rivers," he said, "who taught us that true champions lift others up." "To Mom," Marcus added, "who showed us that kindness always wins." "To family," Jasmine finished, "the ones we're born to, and the ones we build." Later, after the party wound down and the training program kids were practicing their barista skills, Jasmine found herself standing in front of her father's photo. The young couple was still at their booth, the woman actually smiling as Rico served their breakfast with his usual flair. The dragon shrine glowed softly in the corner, its golden eyes watching over all of them. Above the kitchen door, a new sign had been installed just last week: Michael's Place at the Silver Spoon, where everyone belongs. Marcus appeared at her side, photo album clutched to his chest. "Mom, do you think Grandpa would be proud of all of this?" Jasmine looked at her son, this beautiful blend of her father's passion and her own determination. At the diner that had become a home for so many. At the dreams that had sparked from one simple act of kindness. "Baby," she said, "he's been proud all along. We just didn't know he was watching." Outside, the sounds of racing engines filled the Austin air as practice began at the track. Inside, new stories were just beginning. In a booth, in a kitchen, in the hearts of all those who'd found their way home. Dragons, after all, always know where they belong. Sometimes they just need a little help remembering. Thank you for joining Jasmine and Marcus on their incredible journey from that life-changing day at the Silver Spoon Diner. Some dreams really do come true in the most unexpected ways. I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. Are there any special diners or local spots in your community that feel like home? Share your stories with us. If this tale of kindness, racing dreams, and family touched your heart, don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that remind us how one small act of kindness can change everything. Until our next story, remember what Jasmine learned. Sometimes the biggest victories come from helping others shine. See you in the next one.